And we are live. Welcome to this month's Morpheus Intelligence Update, and we are talking transformational leadership today. And so I'm Ian Hatton, and I want to open with a little story. So let's start with this. It starts with an invitation to each of you. What kind of a leader are you, and what kind of a leader do you really want to be? Do you want to be the kind of leader that brings transformation? And I personally believe that transformational leadership is the ultimate domain of leadership. The ultimate domain of leadership. And so I'm going to be exploring a little bit around this, and we are going to start with this. Are you a CEO, or a senior vice president, or a middle manager, or an entrepreneur, or a teacher, or a parent, or just a good friend? Because if you are, it may just be that transformational leadership is the ultimate domain for you. So I'm going to be talking about 4 domains of leadership, but I want to start with this. You never know where you're going. You never know exactly what lies ahead. And 21 years ago, there was a young man who approached me, and he wanted to deal with some personal issues. It was completely in the personal domain. It was relational issues, it was personal issues, it was issues around rights and responsibilities and all these kinds of things. In other words, really very much in the domain of self-leadership and leading others. And what's really interesting is that young man also had a vision to be an entrepreneur, to be a CEO. And today he is a CEO of a multinational company, a company that is busy going global in the tech space, and his influence has just abounded and grown from that initial self-leadership with maybe a little bit of a vision for for what actually is going on, and the whole thing of we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know exactly where it's going. We don't know exactly what we can expect. And what we can expect is that we are going to influence. We are going to be placed in positions where we can have an indelible influence, where we can lead change, where we can build culture. And that doesn't matter whether you're a parent or whether you're a CEO or a senior vice president of a multinational organization. Transformational leadership is where it's at. And that's what we're going to be focusing in on today. So let's have a look at this. So welcome to this Morpheus Intelligence Update. It's actually the beginning of a 4-part series. We're going to be doing this one plus another 3 parts over the next while. And so this is our Morpheus Intelligence Update that we are getting into. And what are we dealing with today? Well, I mean, the clue is here behind me, isn't it? Transformation. But how do we lead transformation? What is that all about? And so at Totally Morpheus, we have a blueprint for transformational leadership. In fact, for all leadership, we have a blueprint that talks about the 4 domains of leadership. So I'm going to start by going and unpacking those 4 domains. Some of you will have done MBAs or MBLs, and you would know about some of these domains. Bit of a refresher for you maybe. For the rest of you, it might be new information. But fundamentally, for me, one of the simplest ways to think of leadership is that we lead in 4 different domains. So I'm going to take you through our blueprint where we can examine this in a little bit more detail. And please post your questions, whether you're following on YouTube, whether you've joined us in the live Zoom meeting. Either way, it comes up in a screen here. I'll be able to respond to your questions as we go along. So feel free to post them as we progress. So let's have a look at this blueprint that we have. And the blueprint, it's newly been modified a little bit because we realized that it wasn't quite complete the way it was. So we've recently modified it. And in this blueprint, we have all 4 domains represented. And if you kind of zoom into the middle of it, you can see that we believe all great leadership is built on self-leadership. If we cannot lead ourselves, how do we lead others? If we cannot influence ourselves, how do we influence others? If we cannot tune into our own emotions, how do we tune into other people's emotions? If we cannot tune into our own physicality, how do we connect with that with our people? And so this whole idea of self-leadership is the core of our blueprint. What's really interesting, though, is that it's very, very closely linked to the next level. But before we go there, we have a range of self-leadership products, and they are called our Morpheus Genius products, because this is where, in leading like Morpheus, we get to discover our own genius, which allows us to discover other people's genius. So how do we discover and leverage other people's genius if we haven't discovered our own? How do we cater for other people's weakness if we haven't accepted our own weakness? So we really want to be able to focus in on this, and that's why we have these Morpheus Genius products. And there's a range of them there, including a 2-year program that we offer to help people on that inner journey, because it is quite a challenging journey. The next area, as we move out from that, is the leading others, leading individuals. How do we awaken genius in our people? Do we have a method for working with their mindsets and helping them to shift their mindsets? Do we know how to make maximum impact on leading others, on inspiring other individuals? And this comes through in our Lead Like Morpheus products. This is where we are leading individuals. We are growing individuals. We, for example, have a process of call, build, release, where we actually upscale, help facilitate the growth of the genius of our people and liberate them to be able to fly. So this is all covered in the Lead Like Morpheus. Now, both of these, the self-leadership and the leading individuals, because the second domain here is individual leadership. How do we lead individuals? How do we do the one-on-one leadership? You're probably already beginning to see that these things don't go away when we become transformational leaders, but I'll come back to that point. Well, what's really interesting here is that this is what the first book of the Lead Like Morpheus series. So Lead Like Morpheus is the first book, and it's available today. In fact, if you are interested, here is a QR code that you can use to get onto the Amazon link if you are interested in getting the book. Available on Kindle or paperback. We also have a collector's edition if anybody wants to inquire directly about that. So what is this book and how does it work? Well, it fundamentally covers these first 2 domains, self-leadership and leading others. You know why? Because there's such a big overlap, because when we're leading ourselves, we're also leading an individual, aren't we? And so all of the facets of individual leadership also apply to self-leadership, and all the facets of self-leadership apply to individual leadership. And so those 2 are covered in this first book, the Lead Like Morpheus book, and those are the first 2 domains of leadership. We then get onto the third domain of leadership. Now, the third domain is building teams, high-performing teams, or team leadership, or creating high-performing teams leadership, because a lot of the leadership of a team is focused around growing the team to the place where it becomes a high-performing team. Maybe using Tuckman's model of forming, storming, norming, performing. But whatever it is, to grow a team to that performing place, that place where we are have maximum morale and maximum productivity in our teams. And so here the model moves out and it covers the why, which is all about connecting our people, connecting them to a purpose, building trust, that kind of thing. Then it goes on to the who, which is where we want to discover each other's strengths and weaknesses, genius, collaboration. How do we optimally collaborate? How do we make sure everybody's in the right seat on the bus in the team? And so this is part of that conscious collaboration model. And then it gets onto the how. The conscious construction is the how. This is where we are building the team. How do we continuously improve? How do we want to be together to be a high-performing team? If this is our purpose, what do we need to do together to achieve that purpose? That is the how. Call it the ground rules, call it the ways of working, call it the norms. But that conscious construction, how are we going to evaluate our progress? How are we going to assess the levels of engagement and build on them all the time? How are we going to grow our trust in our team? And all of this is dealt with there. So that is the third domain of leadership. And our range of products here are simply called Team Like Morpheus. So the Team Like Morpheus products will take organizations through a journey. And it's really interesting. The last 2 Fridays, I've been working with CEOs and their leadership teams. And we've been going through this process of the why and the who. We've done a little bit of the how. We've still got a long way to go on the how, but we've been going through the why and the who, the conscious connection and the conscious collaboration. And it has been mind-blowing for these people. They've sort of gone, I just never realized that before. That makes so much sense. Oh, wow, but that changes everything. That changes how we do things. And we're focusing on all of this. We've even done appreciation circles as well. And we've seen incredible breakthrough there for these leadership teams. And for me, the ultimate teaming is, of course, a leadership team. That then leads us on to the final layer of this model of building this this particular thing, where we are building it in terms of creating this transformational leadership, and it builds on the self-leadership, the individual leadership, the team leadership. It builds on all of these things because the outer model requires all of that. And so here we have this shift like Morpheus, the product range of champion change, leading change, and so on. So I'm going to drill into that in a little bit more detail. So let's start with this. Champion change is the first component of this. And seeing that we're talking transformational leadership, we're talking shift like Morpheus today, what is this championed change? Well, championed change is where we are seeing the changes that are led in a way that result in implementation. There's various bits of research, but a lot of changes, they say there's an under 20% success rate for a lot of changes that are implemented. In other words, did they achieve what they wanted to achieve in the time frame? And less than 20% of changes actually do achieve what we wanted to achieve within the specified time range. And so this championed change, this element of how do we grow this, how do we have a change that is actually implemented? I'm going to drill into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Then the second area is where we are building a compelling culture. You see, so much of organizations, if we want our people to be self-led, if we want our people to be continually available, processing, making wise decisions, living our values, we need to build a compelling culture. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail around that as well. And then the final area of this transformational leadership is what we call indelible influence. Indelible influence. You could use the word legacy. I know a lot of leaders don't like the word legacy. And I think what they're objecting to in that case is that sort of sense of self-importance. Well, actually, maybe a legacy is not determined by us. It's what is bestowed on us after we're gone. But when I then probe and say to people, okay, so you don't want to leave a legacy, then they sort of start to get a little bit hesitant. And then I say, do you want to leave the world the way you found it? And everybody says, no, I definitely want to make a difference. Well, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about building self-importance. We're talking about building indelible influence, things that we can change in our lives for the future. So that is really what that is. And so that takes us through our blueprint for the 4 domains of leadership. And if you take it from the outside in again, if you want to lead transformation, you want to lead change, you want to build a culture, you want to leave a legacy, then you need a team, because you can't champion change without a team. You can't build a culture without a team. You can't leave indelible influence. So that takes us into the next ring again. And what is a team made up of? It's made up of individuals. And that brings us into the second domain. And then that takes us to the first domain, because if we want to transform, it always starts with self. And so you can see how this blueprint works both in and out. And that's how it goes. So this transformational leadership, let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail, and then we'll get on to a Q&A. So this Shift Like Morpheus product range, this transformational leadership idea, what else is it called? Let me start with that. There are multiple definitions. There are some textbook ones some of you will have come across. One of them is charismatic leadership. It's very unpopular, though. People hate to think of themselves as a charismatic leader. But if you do think about people who've really transformed, there is something of a charisma, whether we're talking a Martin Luther King Jr. or a Nelson Mandela, or even a Steve Jobs. There was a charisma. There was something of that. But you might not think of yourself as a charismatic leader, so put that one aside. Sometimes it's called organizational leadership. Organizational leadership meaning that I'm leading an organization, I'm leading something of substance. It could be a non-profit, it could be political, it could be business, but that organizational leadership, it could be a department within an organization or a particular area. But that's why I prefer this term transformational leadership. To me, it's a much more inspiring term. It's where my job as a leader is wanting to have an impact that is bigger than an individual or a team. And if you think about that, a lot of parents even think that way. They want not just to impact their children, but to impact their grandchildren. They want to not only build a great family unit, but actually build a great family unit that will bring good family units that follow. That's the vision of transformational leadership. It's thinking multi-generationally. It's thinking about what I'm doing here with these individuals, this team, I actually want to have a bigger impact than that. If you're a senior manager and you manage managers, then it's managing those managers in a way that what is the impact of what they do? And does that build a culture, or does that influence a change? Maybe it's societal change. Maybe it's a technology change. Maybe it's something that really does inspire you. So that's what we're getting into now. And so I'm going to go through these three different aspects, and we're going to start with this one of champion change. So one of the things I find fascinating is when I see leaders who think that announcing a change is bringing the change. And, change is often resisted. People, a very small percentage of people love change, probably under 20%. It could even be lower than that. But quite a small number of people absolutely love change. These are people who are wired for learning new things, and they just want to learn new things all the time. And they don't want to sort of get stuck in something old. But most people resist change, especially change that is imposed on them. So the moment we are forcing, let me just ask you to pause for a moment as a leader. And let me ask you this question. How do you feel about being changed versus being part of a change? And why would it be any different for your people? Nobody likes to be changed, to be forced to change. In fact, it feels like a boundary violation. And so championed change, and this, by the way, is our topic for the next MIU next month. And that is where we're going to be drilling in to this idea that we have built a change team that involves people. Now, this doesn't mean, by the way, that suddenly all change becomes democratic. And by democratic, I mean where everybody gets a vote on what the change is. You know what? If you're a visionary leader, then you will get the change You will need to lead the change. You will need to be the one who inspires others about the need to change. Not everybody's going to go, oh, yes, please, let's change. But what do we want to do? We want to see strategically as leaders, where do we need to go? How are we going to get there? What needs to change? And this is really what is so exciting. So we really want to have this idea of being part of the change. We don't want to be changed. We want to be part of a change. And so champion change, we're going to unpack this next month, is where we have a way of changing and bringing change that isn't necessarily that everybody has a say in what the change is, but we do want to involve people on how it gets implemented. And that is absolutely critical. So we're going to unpack that in more detail next month. The next area that we're going to look at in transformational leadership is compelling culture, building a compelling culture. Now, notice the word compelling. You want a culture where people say, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of that. It's not a matter of, oh, well, we've got some values and they sit on the wall, and every now and then somebody asks me what they are and I have to go and quickly look at the wall to see what they are, or I need to scratch my brain and go, is there an acronym for this and how do I do this? No. We want it where what is valued in the organization is intrinsic to the organization. It's compelling. If I want to be here, I want to be part of this culture. And you can think of this in terms of sports teams. You can think of this in terms of organizational culture. We want to build the kind of culture that people deeply desire being part of. And that we're going to explore in 2 months' time in that Morpheus Intelligence Update, where we're going to be unpacking this idea of how do we build a culture. I'll be telling stories because I've experience in this. I've been part of culture change teams. The first culture change team I was ever involved in was, believe it or not, in 1996. Long time ago. And you know what? It was successful. It was the bringing together of 4 different companies into one company, but not allowing one culture to be the predominant one, which is what many of the people did want, because that, again, feels like we have change imposed on us. We actually want to be able to have the kind of culture that makes us not have the Sunday night blues. We want to be able to go, oh, I get to go to work tomorrow. I get to contribute to this culture. I get to go and see and be with these people that I'm going to be making a difference in the world with. So this is what this compelling culture is that we want to build. And we're going to explore that one in 2 months' time. And you can imagine how crucial this is to transformational leadership. And it obviously builds on the leading change, because any culture change is a change, right? And so we're building on that concept. And then the final one that we have is this idea of indelible influence. Now, I've already unpacked a little bit about people's objections to this idea of I'm here to build a legacy. You know, so many people just go, oh, our societal culture kind of goes, oh, you can't think that way. But what if we're going, I want to make a difference? And I'm working with leaders left, right, and center at the moment who want to make a difference. I'm working with the CEO of a non-profit that is making an indelible influence on that community where they are based. I've got a meeting in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, with somebody who runs another non-profit that is making an incredible difference across Southern Africa. And building a better future for so many of our population. And then even when I look at some of the CEOs of more commercial operations, I'm working with 2 CEOs at the moment with some coaching, and they're both heading up big commercial operations or significant commercial operations. And even they are talking about, how do I build this thing that it will outlast me? How do I grow it? How do I make sure that it is sustainable? And so that's what we're looking at here, and that we're going to deal with in detail in 3 months' time. So in the final piece of this 4-part series. So today we've introduced transformational leadership. We are then going into leading change, building culture, and then creating legacy. So that's where we are going. And we're going to be exploring with the indelible influence, what are the things that we can do that will make the biggest difference, that will make the lasting change. Too often we see change that doesn't last, that people just revert back to the old ways, and we want to make a difference in our society. So, any questions? Let's get some comments. Let's get some questions. I see there is one comment over here of be changed or being part of the change. Yeah, this is such a big and important issue that we have, and let's have a look and see how we can make that kind of a change. How do we make a change that people want to participate in? How do we bring in change where people feel they have a say, however they're also very aware of how important the change is, so they're not opposed to the change? How do we create the environment? You know, this story of we so often have this thing of people who are resisting the plan. But you know what? People who build the plan, people who plan the battle, don't battle the plan. People who build the plan don't resist the plan. And that's really what it's all about. So I've got another question coming in from the Zoom audience here. Thank you, Cindy, for reposting that. I'm going to just stick it to the broadcast here. And it's this one. What is the best route to take to connect ethical consciousness and ultimately transformational leadership? So the answer is, unfortunately, it starts with self. If we haven't examined ourselves and become conscious ourselves, how can we expect others to be? And I learned this the hard way. I was venturing into a whole desire to change the world. I was going to go and change the world. I had all the ideas. I had all the plans. I was going to make the difference. I was going to be the one who brought this significant change to the world. And you know what? It all fell apart. And why did it fall apart? It fell apart for a very simple reason. I hadn't changed myself first. We all know the wonderful Mahatma Gandhi statement of be the change you want to see in the world. So if we want to bring ethical and conscious transformation, and then it's going to need to start with ourselves. Now, that isn't enough. The self-leadership journey is not a selfish journey. In fact, one of the wonderful things about self-leadership is it always has a ripple-on effect, but it always starts with self. And it starts then with the leading of the individuals. It starts then with the building of teams. How do we build a culture in our teams? And then only can we go on to the next level. But it starts with self and then moves along to individuals, teams, and ultimately impact enough individuals and teams, and you've changed the world. It doesn't mean you've got to influence everybody. In fact, I think there's research that says even if you just influence a couple of %, you could change the entire world. So we have another one here. So let me remove that. And thank you, Lois. Great insights. So let's have a look here. Another one here from the Zoom audience. Thank you, Cindy, for reposting this. Understand transformational leadership is needed to build high-performing teams. I know that it starts with me. How can I develop or nurture transformation in myself and in turn in others? Do you have programs that cater to this need? Well, this is in fact the reason that Totally Morpheus exists. I know that's kind of a grand statement, but this is in fact why Totally Morpheus exists, because we have programs at every level. And what I've come to realize is that for me, the most satisfying piece is the transformational leadership piece, building transformational leaders. So working at every one of the 4 domains, but ultimately the 4th domain, the domain of transformational leadership, is the one that excites me the most. And that is really what we have built Totally Morpheus about, is in fact to address that very issue. And we have an assessment. So I didn't put the QR code for the assessment up. That was a mistake on my part. But we have an assessment called the Egg Assessment, and if you go to totallymorpheus.com, you will find it there. And the Egg Assessment, in fact, tells you where you are in each of these 4 domains in your leadership. So we actually have an assessment that will help you. So it does talk about, and many of you will have heard me talk about this, are we in survivor mode or striver mode or thriver mode or somewhere in between the 3? And that is one aspect, but that's one of the dimensions. But we have 2 more dimensions, and the third dimension deals with where are you in the 4 domains of leadership: self-leadership, individual leadership, team leadership, and transformational leadership. And so that's where we're going. I see we are out of time. Thank you, Lois. I see your comment here as well in the chat. Yes, it does start with self. All great leadership starts with self, but it flows out to the rest as we gain skills and gain confidence with that. So with that, I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank you very much, everybody, and wonderful to have you along. And we will see you next month when we are talking leading change. How do we lead change?